Shrutismritipurananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhedu Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Gukarastu Andhakaro Vai Rukarastu Nivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namashri Shankarananda Guru Padam Bhujanmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmane. So last week we had presented this particular chapter number 4. Chapter number 11 with the preamble that it gives us a tour of the false sense of joy in our life. And false sense meaning that it has some conditions and limitations which makes it really not the joy that we are seeking. We are all seeking, this is the purpose of our life. If you were to ask yourself or to explain it to someone who asks what is the purpose of life, the purpose of life is to seek a permanent source of joy. This becomes very, very clear that really speaking, we'll go into this in more detail in a minute, that ultimately what we want is ananda, joy. Everyone. If you look at even an ant or a cockroach or a deer or a tiger, whatever, animals, plants, human beings, everyone. What is the common thing for us is we are all searching for joy. And a joy which is not transient. This is the thing that we need to really think about. This is where the vichara, the analysis, the thinking has to be done. Because in Vedanta it says it, there is an important shloka, I think, it's called Avicharita Siddham Dvaitam. So Dvaitam means a sense of limitation, sense of duality. Duality means limitation. Because in duality there are two factors, each one of them limiting each other. And this sense of duality is based on non-enquiry. So this is what is called avicharita siddham, one which is established by not looking into it. So that's our theme of life, is that we have moments of joy, but we don't analyze what the implication of the momentariness of the joy really means. How did that happen? I remember I appeared in a competitive exam in India called UPSC, which is given to, various professional students. For I was in engineering, and so there was an engineering form of that, and so there was an oral exam. So there was a written exam, then there's an oral exam. And I still remember that there was a examiner who said to me, well, tell me about your practical experience in the laboratory as an electrical engineer. So I said, we had some experiments that we did and so on. So he said, was it successful? Did the circuit work? And I said, no, it didn't work. At least I was honest about it. Then he asked me, did you inquire to find out how and or why the circuit didn't work? And I had to say, not really. I didn't do it. And so this is what really distinguishes a innovator and a very accomplished engineer from a run-of-the-mill engineering student like I was, that you don't have a sense of inquiry as to why this thing is not working. Let me look into that. All that happened later on in my life when I became a hardware engineer with IBM and then a software engineer. Actually, hardware engineering was also done in the software at that time. Then I learned the value of inquiry. Why doesn't it work? It must work, but it doesn't work. Why not? So you have to inquire. This is called debugging. So similarly, when we have moments of ananda in our life, we just don't inquire into it. And what distinguishes a person who is on to something, a uttama adhikari. Uttama adhikari means a superior student. So there are three kinds of students. There is a uttama adhikari, which is a class student. There is a madhyama adhikari, which is kind of middling, and there is an adhama adhikari, means that he's really not an adhikari. He's not a real student. He just masquerades as one, but he doesn't really belong in it. Belong to the status of being a student. So an uttama adhikari and a madhyama adhikari, what distinguishes them is a sense of inquiry. It should be. So this is exactly what we are supposed to do here, because as we saw here in the list of various ananda sources, the analysis of the type of ananda, type of joy will be given, and what we are supposed to do, if we are incapable of doing it ourselves, which is really most of the case, we don't really figure out how to do it, how to inquire. But the Shastra gives us a path into the inquiry. It suggests this is what you need to be doing. And if you do it, then wonderful things will happen to you. So do inquire. But you have to inquire. Just don't take my word for it, because taking my word for it doesn't really do anything to you. Because that just means the book says this, the Gita says this, and so on. But you ask yourself, does my heart accept it? Well, I kind of accept it because I have some shraddha towards this teaching, but not really, because it doesn't come from my own experience. So that's the difference between an uttama adhikari and a madhyama adhikari. So here, again, to briefly summarize, what is being given here is a way to to look at your various experiences of joy or the lack of joy and to draw some conclusions from it. And if you learn to do that, then wonderful things will happen, because then you can say where you are making a mistake and so on. And so we went through all of this last time, and then a tour of these what I called false anandas. False anandas means that they are reflections. So if you're looking at your reflection in a clear mirror, even a very clear mirror, it looks exactly like you. At least the front part of it. This is what Maheshanji was pointing out. This is, when you look at yourself in the mirror, you don't have a 3D vision. You just have a 2D vision, but the 2D vision is very clear. The front part of your body and your face and so on is exactly what you see. But of course it's missing your back and so on. So even though it looks like you, it is not you. So this is what is called a false image. So similarly, our Ananda in life is a false image of the real Ananda. And you don't know that because you just take it to be Ananda. That's it. This is my joy. And we will analyze it, different kinds of Anandas. But whatever it happens, you just take it for what it is. And you don't really see, is this a reflection? Is this a false one? Because we, I think, ended up in the last class by saying that you cannot find a real one until you see a false one. If you don't see anything, then you don't really understand what the reality of the source is. But if you keep on analyzing falseness of Ananda again and again, not just experiencing Ananda and experiencing the stopping of the Ananda, which is what we do. We have all day long, if you were to analyze, we have moments of Ananda, moments of stopping the Ananda, and we just take it for what it is, and we are used to it. And then if you're hungry, then you eat something, so you have an Ananda of eating, of fulfilling your hunger. When you have something missing, you try to find a remedy for that, and you get the remedy. It completes your search. Then you go on to the next one. We think this is what my life is all about. You're not satisfied. It's not as though you are completely happy, but you don't know what else to do. Yes, that's all one can do. So in any case, in this experiencing of Ananda is incomplete. That means you have not, just like I was saying, that really I didn't become a acceptable engineer in college because I'd failed to analyze. I should have gone to the teacher and said, what does it take for me to make this circuit work? Can you please show it to me? And with his help, I should have been able to debug it. I didn't do that. I said, you know what, my score was okay, and so I was satisfied with it, and so on with went. But really, if you wanted to become a tinkerer and a designer of circuits and so on, which is Uttama Adhikari, then you need to really figure out why something doesn't work. Because it should work. That doesn't quite enter our mind as far as the source of Ananda is concerned, because we're not sure that there is a permanent source of Ananda. But even our quest of Ananda should give us a strong hint that there is something called a permanent Ananda. Permanent means timeless, not forever time-wise, but something where time doesn't enter, which is the very nature of Ananda. How should we even think about that? Because in and through the various experiences of joy and lack of joy, my quest to find Ananda never wavers. See, this is what we need to think about. It's because supposing you are disappointed that your sense of joy is time limited and for whatever reason it goes away, and then you say, you know what, this is okay, whatever it is. To a certain extent that does happen in our life, but really speaking, deep within us, our quest for Ananda never leaves. So this is a good hint that you cannot, this is what our Shastra says. You see, this is what interesting, this is worth really thinking about. So we have two kinds of desires in our life. One kind of desire is the class of desires which is not centered on me, which was given to me by, you can call it Ishvara or nature or whatever, it was given to you. So in this one there is a desire to be not hungry. So the hunger was given to me, and the means of satisfying the hunger was also given to me. The desire to sleep is also one of these. Desire to drink is also one of those. And another one is the desire to be happy, given to us. So in all these desires, the parents don't need to play a big role. You cannot say, you know, you should be hungry and you should now satisfy your hunger. Similarly, they cannot say that you need to be happy. If the child could speak, it would say, I know that. Why are you telling me the simple something which is already known to me? So all these desires are given to me and not instigated by me. And from here we can say that this class of desires that we just grouped, hunger, thirst, etc., including a sense of joy, completion, and so on, must have an answer. They have an answer. They have to have an answer. You cannot say a person can become hungry and there is no way to fulfill that hunger. No way. Absolutely not. As soon as you have hunger, you just keep on exacerbating it and you die. No. There is whatever desires we have which are natural to me, which is given to me, have a remedy associated with it. Now let's go to the other side. There are lots of desires that are based on the individual. They were not given to you. The methodology was given to you, but really you don't have to have it. And so, for example, supposing you want to get an MBA, Masters of Business Administration, that is not a natural one. Supposing you want to become a doctor, it's not a natural one. Some people want to be doctors, others say, I don't want to be a doctor. If you want to live in a particular part of town, that's all individual. And if you look at the grouping of all these individualistic desires, you can make a statement, a general statement, that this set of desires may or may not be fulfilled. May not be fulfilled. Swami Dayananji, I think he used to say that, I still remember his talk. He said, suppose you have a daughter born and you individually have a desire saying, wouldn't it be nice if my daughter became the President of the United States? Not everybody has that desire, but it's very possible that you may decide, my daughter, I must try my best to make my daughter the President of the United States. And then it's very likely that that desire will not be fulfilled. So you have to live with the disappointment, if you want to call it a disappointment, of seeing that this daughter of mine, she is not very extroverted. She may be bright, she may be everything else, but she's kind of like a happy person by itself, doesn't want to really talk to other people, and is more of an introvert. Happy, just fine. In order to be, do you know what a person has to go through go through the election process? My God. Incredible how extroverted you have to be. You have to greet everybody. Hello, how are you? You have to kiss babies, all kinds of stuff. And so you may not be satisfying your desire. So therefore, now we can draw a conclusion from this, that Ananda, which is really the real Ananda. You get symptoms of Ananda by here and there, as we will see, but the real Ananda you are not getting, even though you should be getting that. You should be. Real Ananda means the very nature of Ananda, not this is the real you standing in the front of the mirror. Because all others are copies of you. But you are the real one. If you have 3 or 4 different mirrors, then depending on which side of the mirror is there, you can see different parts of it. I remember when I first was losing my hair, it was really a revelation, because my spouse and my friends, they were very polite. They didn't tell me that I'm going bald. And I could never tell directly by looking at the mirror that I'm going bald. But I remember a couple of times I would go to these groupings of mirrors somewhere, like a restaurant or gym or something. And I looked at myself, I says, oh my God. For the men, it all starts at the back of the skull. There is a huge patch, there was absolutely no hair, and I was shocked. I says, what? I didn't know that I was going to be bald. And so reflections are possible, but they don't show the real you. And you are the real one, whether you see it or not. And so the real Ananda is the Swarupa Ananda, not copies of Ananda. So this is what we have to do. Anyway, so let us continue with another introduction to the analysis of Ananda. So here, as you know, just to reiterate, but this is good to keep in mind. So here in the last 1/3 section of Pancadasi, each chapter has a separate name as well as a common name. So it doesn't happen in all the other 10 chapters that came before it, because the last 5 chapters deal with Ananda, joy, an analysis of joy. And in these 5 chapters, number 11 through 15, they all have both a common name and a separate name. So common name is called Brahmananda. Brahmananda really should be seen as the real Ananda. Okay? And the separate names of each of these can be looked as copies of Brahmananda. So there are 5 main apparent Anandas that are being analyzed. So the first 3 are called Yogananda, Atmananda and Advaitananda. And so these 3 are in a way aspects of Brahmananda. Yogananda, Atmananda and Advaitananda, and we will go over this. Then the 4th and the 5th one are called Vidyananda and Vishayananda. So Vidyananda and Vishayananda. So this titling of these 5 is now taken up in verse number 11 of the 11th chapter. Verse number 11 of the 11th chapter. And so we started looking into this. Anandaha, Trividhaha, Brahmanandaha, Vidyahanandaha, Vidyasukham, and Vishayanandaha. So here he has made a new grouping. The first 3 are called Brahmananda, even though they are Atmananda, Advaitananda, etc. But he's called it Brahmananda. Then the other 2 he has distinguished it by calling Vidyananda and Vishayananda. Okay? So now, very briefly, what this has done is, at this moment, this is a brief introduction which he will now go into much more detail in the next 4 or 5 chapters. And we will try to keep up with it as much as we can, but not entirely, not all the verses. It's just too many. So we will pick and choose, as we have talked about it many times, conceptually, based on bringing out a concept and then highlighting it, and then jumping on to a group of other verses, and not have to go through sequentially all the verses, which you can do. You're welcome to do that at your own time. But in terms of the once a week class, this is the topic this is the tactic, not topic, but this is the tactic that we are going to take. So here he has talked about, so let's look at, so just as a summary, he has distinguished Brahmananda from Vidyananda and Vishayananda. Okay, so let's briefly look at it, although it will be given in more detail. So let's go into that. So what is Vidyananda? So Vidyananda means an Ananda based on your buddhi, your thinking, your knowledge. And Vishayananda is not based on your buddhi, but on your sense organs. So buddhi means, there's there's antahkarana, So these are the inner instruments. So there we saw that the first two are buddhi and manaha. So these are superior sense organs. Superior sense organs in the sense that the other sense organs are dispatchers, or they are not dispatchers, they are the data that is given to your buddhi. In other words, for example, when you see a very nice fruit, you say, oh, this is a nice apple. I wonder what type it is. So you go to touch it. Your eyes say, it looks like an apple, very nice apple. And you go to touch it, and it's very cold and it looks like a stone. I mean, it feels like a stone. It is a stone. So the buddhi is, so your eyes say, oh, I didn't know that. I can't tell it's a stone or not. And the touch says, yep, it should be a stone because a real apple feels differently. It's softer, it's warmer. This is very cold and it's very hard to the touch. And so the buddhi resolves these two and says, that's interesting. What a nice looking false apple. This is the nature of the buddhi. Sense organs, on the other hand, simply give you without the buddhi. It just whatever they see in front of you, they just give you the data for that. So Vidyananda is Ananda based on buddhi, and Vishayananda is Ananda based on sense organs. So for instance, we can look at it, let's look at it in reverse way. Let's look at Vishayananda. So Vishayananda means that the joy comes from satisfying sense organs. So supposing you eat ice cream, or you eat an Indian sweet called rasagulla, or some kind of a dessert, any dessert, which would this be? Would this be Vidyananda or Vishayananda? It will be Vishayananda, right? There's no assuming that the dessert is not a stone dessert, in which case your Vidyananda would have, your buddhi would have to be involved. So let's just take a simple case that you're just finished with your dinner and you say, I want to have a chocolate, dark chocolate. And so when you eat the dark chocolate, you have some ananda. Similarly, any kind of an ice cream or some other dessert, or even the normal food to set a sandwich, if you are very hungry to eat a sandwich or a pasta or something like this, is all Vishayananda. So there is a class of joy, ananda, which is based on Vishaya. It's called Vishayananda. Vidyananda, on the other hand, is based on some knowledge by thinking. So a very simple case is that supposing you were expecting, supposing you had applied to some place for membership or something, I don't know, something. And when the letter comes, it says, we're very pleased to tell you we've accepted your application. So that one is not a Vishayananda, it is Vidyananda. Because now you have a knowledge that I got it. It's called Vishayananda. Called Vidyananda. So here Swami Maheshananji gives a very beautiful example. He says, now look at it. Supposing you are fast asleep Fast asleep means no dreaming, no waking. You're knocked out. In there you have Brahmananda. So we will go into this in more detail, but basically it is Brahmananda. Brahmananda means what? Because it's close to Brahmananda. It is not Brahmananda actually, very close to it. It's close to it because it is not a Vishayananda. It's not as though you're eating ice cream in the middle of the night. It is not Vidyananda. You didn't come up with any kind of a knowledge to say, oh, I'm so happy. No. It is uncaused Ananda. So the deep sleep Ananda is uncaused. It just happens. It's given to you by Ishvara. It is one of the most beautiful gifts given by Ishvara. We'll talk much more about the gifting by Ishvara, our not recognizing it, then recognizing it, appreciating it. All of that will come in. This is what is called, would be called Ishvara Bhakti. So Ishvara Bhakti and Ishvara Jnanam, the knowledge and the very devotion to Ishvara, are really two sides of the same coin. But yes, you do have to look at one side of the coin where bhakti is involved, which means a complete appreciation. How did this happen? And all of that, I think, will require some explanation, and we'll go over that perhaps in some other form. But at this point, you know there is a gift given to you which is uncaused Ananda during deep sleep. Okay? So that's the reference point that Swami Maheshananji gives. To explain, we are explaining another form of Vidyananda. This is what we're doing. Okay? So now, are we okay? There's something. It looks like everything is okay. So now what happens is, suppose you prepare to go to sleep. Prepare to go to sleep. So you, and this is what they say, I took this even before the advice was given to me, not to have a television in the bedroom. And in the beginning I had to sell that to my wife, but she agreed to it, and so we have a bedroom upstairs, and the TV is on this floor. And if people want to watch TV, they can watch TV and so on. My wife, or if I want to watch sport, generally I don't watch any TV at all except for sports. And so all this time the sports has been completely missing because I only follow the three sports: basketball, baseball, and football. Basketball is over. Baseball for San Francisco was a complete disappointment this year, and a great gift given to me. I didn't waste a single minute watching any, because my watching is really more of I follow the individuals in that team, how they do. It's very interesting to me because I used to play a lot of sports. So when a new person comes up and who is doing well, I follow some aspects of that. But this year they give me a great favor. They were a disappointing team, and I have not wasted any time watching it. 49ers are coming up, so starting next Sunday, I would start watching a little bit of 49ers. And the way I do that is I almost never look at it live. I record it, and while I'm eating my dinner or something, I will quickly go through that. So that's the extent of it. But upstairs there's no television. So when we prepare for sleep, we shut the TV off, we shut the cell phone, shut your laptop or desktop or something. You go and brush your teeth, you change into pajamas, and then you start to make sure that the temperature is right. These days it's very hot. Last night, oh my gosh, it was 82 when my wife and I were ready to go. And somehow I put some fan on, but my wife went to sleep, but I was really not able to go to sleep. And so I had to wait for a while until the temperature dropped, and then I opened. Anyway, so the point is that we make sure that the temperature is right, the bed is made, and as soon as we lie down, so this is the point to note here. This is what Swami Maheshananda is saying. Don't take my word for it. This is all these examples. He says Vidyananda is the following. You have not yet fallen asleep where you have the experience of Brahmananda. That hasn't happened yet because you're still making up, you're doing all the things, shutting things off and lying down and so on. But then you flop up the pillow and make sure that the blanket or whatever it is all there, and you lie down, and you close your eyes. You have some partial ananda. What is the partial ananda? Partial ananda means these are false anandas. All these are false anandas. Vidyananda is also false. Vishayananda is also false. False means copies. So Vidyananda is also partial. Why is it partial? And how does it happen? One has to look at that. Because you are anticipating that you are going to be asleep soon. And this is what happens in our life. Sometimes, you're worried about something and you're concerned and you are so on. But pretty soon you say, you know what, I'll look at it tomorrow. I'll think about it tomorrow. Today, I just want to go to sleep. Why do you think that? Vidyananda. Why Vidyananda? Because you know that going to sleep, you'll be very happy. So you don't want any concern. It's an external disturbance which is bothering you, and you don't want to be bothered at this point. So the very making of the bed and lying down, the proximity to the Brahmananda itself is very pleasant. So this is one example of the Vidyananda. The very classical example of Vidyananda is that you got some good news, that you passed an exam or you got into a club or something like this that you were anticipating. That's the classical Vidyananda. But look at this part of the Vidyananda, which is beautiful, as Swami Maheshananda points out, is just the proximity to Brahmananda and your knowledge. You see, this is the thing. Your knowledge from your previous experiences of your own life, that very soon I am going to be very happy. This is why, sooner or later, it is later for the younger people, sooner for the older people. You say the world is enough, let that be what it is. I am going to go to sleep. And so this knowledge that I am going to go to sleep and why do I want to go to sleep? Because if the sleep causes some problems, you'll never go to sleep. Swami Dayananda used to say that you will put chilies in your eyes so that you never go to sleep because it's such an unpleasant experience. But that's not the case. Sleep is the most pleasant experience everybody has, common to all. Look at the design of Ishvara. Everyone. So this is the Unitarian view of the world. Not as though I am the only one that enjoys sleep and your sleep is terrible. Yeah, they have some variations, of course, depending on our our vasanas, our karmas and so on, just like it is during the day. Night also can be disturbed. There are some variations, but more or less the deep sleep is exactly the same. And we know it. So therefore even the proximity to it is called Vidyananda. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. So this is a very brief introduction to the three of them, which is three of them being Brahmananda, Vidyananda and Vishayananda. Okay? So this is covered in verse number 11. So if you see any commentary, either by any of the Mahatmas, they will all present this view, and I've already given you Swami Maheshananji's. Okay, now let's go to verse number 12. We won't always go to all the verses, but here we will go to number 12. And the reason we will go to 12 now, and this is what I wanted to point out to you, is that when you go to 12, it doesn't seem like there was any reason for the connection, but there is. So, Swami Maheshananji points out in Hindi, as an introduction to number 12, ब्रह्मानंद समझाने के लिए कृष्ण यजुर्वेद की तैत्तिरीय श्रुति का आधार लेते हैं. It means number 12 is being presented for the sake of understanding Brahmananda. And it presents the Taittiriya Upanishad, which is part of the Krishna Yajurveda. This is also a very important one, several aspects to it. So the reason I selected number 12 is because it's a launching pad of a new direction being now that we have looked at all 5 of the previous ones, really 3 at the moment, Brahmananda, Vishayananda and Vidyananda. Now the launching is that of Brahmananda. We have briefly talked about Vidyananda and Vishayananda, now we talk about Brahmananda. Beautiful connection, it has to be presented. It's not obvious from number 12. This is the value of the Mahatma's commentaries. For example, number 12 says, Bhriguhu putraha pitushrutva varunat brahma lakshanam anna prana mano buddhihi astiti uktva anandam vijaggivan. So he just says that it talks about the Krishna Yajurveda, the Taittiriya Upanishad, which I'll present in a minute. But to say that it is because of unfolding of the Brahmananda is the contribution of the Mahatmas that give the commentary. So that's what it is. So what it says, number 12, is that in order to explain, briefly explain, not a very detailed explanation, in order to do the vichara, doing the analysis of Brahmananda, the example of the Taittiriya Upanishad is being given. What is the example of the Taittiriya Upanishad? So this is an important one. We should understand that. So there was a rishi called Bhrigu. Ultimately he became a rishi, but not initially. He was just a human being. He was the son of Varuna. And the Varuna was already a rishi. Rishi means, then Rishanti iti rishi means one who know what the whole thing is all about. So in a way, really all of us are trying to become Rishi. And this is called Arsha Vidya Center. Arsha means Rishehe Idam, the Vidya of the Rishis. We are all trying to become Rishis. So we have a sense of the vision of the completeness of ourselves, the reality of Ishvara, reality of Atma. This is what we are all trying to do. So Bhrigu was not there yet, like you and I, and he approached his son, his father, who was a rishi called Varuna, and he says, Adhihi Bhagava Adhihi Bhagava. He approached the Varuna and he says, can you please teach me Atma Vidya? Like you have Atma Vidya, you are a Brahmanishta, you are a Rishi, you are a Jivan Mukta. I want to be the same way. Can you please tell me about Brahman? So now, as the Taittiriya Upanishad goes through, and some of us have taken the classes on that, so it will become a little bit better clear for you. So he gives the Lakshana of Brahman. Right? So Lakshana of Brahman means that what is unique about Brahman, he tells him. Because he says, I want to know about Brahman. And so he says, you want to know about Brahman? Okay, he says, how is that unique? What's so different about it that others don't have it? Because everything is unique in this world. The Brahma is also a vastu, it's a reality which should be understood and known. What is the Lakshana? So Varuna tells him, okay, good. Here is the Lakshana for Brahman, from which everything is born, in which they never leave it while they are still there, all the various things, and into which they all dissolved. And that vastu, that entity from which everything is born, everything is maintained, and everything goes back is called Brahman. Think about it. He says, please, you asked me about Brahman, so I am telling you this is the Brahman's Lakshana. Think about it. Okay? So please think about it, and when you have figured it all out, to check it to see whether your answer is correct or not, then please come and approach me again. So Bhrigu goes away and thinks of the various things in the world. And he says, if I look at Annam means the food in the world. I think that fits the definition of what my father told me. Because I find everything is born from food. Even the life-giving semen of a father, even the garbhasthanam of a stree, of the mother, also is born out of food. And so human beings are born out of food. And they are maintained by food alone. Because really the whole body consists of nothing but various forms of food. There is blood, there are muscles, there are bones. These are all various forms of food. All the scientists know it. And where do they all come back? Where do they all go back to when they die? They become food alone. This is why people, whether you bury them as the Muslims do, or Christians do, or if you burn them like the Hindus do, you cremate them, what remains is nothing but they go back into the earth alone as food. So that means food is Brahman. I think I know that. So he goes back to his father and says, "Sir, Annam Brahma." Annam Brahma. So the father says, "Not really. Not really, because food is an inert substance and Brahman is not inert. Food is eaten. And yes, you are right, it gives rise to bodies and so on, but it is inert. Cannot be Brahma. You please go back again. Think about it." So Bhrigu then went to the next step to say, maybe it is the prana, the life-giving entity called prana, which is absorbed from the air, the oxygen, and which circulates and maintains the body. And the body is living with nothing but, the living being is nothing but prana. And when the prana leaves, there is no human being. So the human being is really born out of prana, sustained by prana, and dissolves back into the prana. So it must be the prana. He says, "I think this is the answer." Goes back to his father and says, "Sir, I think prana is Brahman." Father says, "No, it is not Brahman." And I won't go into all the details of why it is not Brahman and so on. So then he goes back and he says, maybe the mind is the Brahman, thoughts. Thoughts are Brahman. And again, when he comes back, the father says, "You're getting close, but not really." Because he gives a very simple example. In the deep sleep state, the mind disappears. At least in deep sleep state, the prana was still there. So, the basis has to be present for the dependence to be present. The basics have to be present. So if manaha is the basic and the manaha disappears during deep sleep, how can the karya, the effect of the manaha, still be alive? Don't you see that? So Bhrigu says, "You're right, sir." So he says, maybe it is buddhi. Same issue with buddhi. Doesn't make any difference. Buddhi also dissolves at night time. So it cannot be buddhi. Then he comes back and he says, Anandaha. Anandaha. People are born from the Ananda. They actually are sustained by Ananda. And when Ananda is missing, they also want to go back to it. As you know, this is just it's very interesting, very tragic that recently, just yesterday, the chief financial officer of Bed Bath and what is it? Bed Bath and what is the third word? Anyway, bed bath in the kitchen or something like this. It's very common shop that we can go to. He committed suicide. Committed suicide by jumping off from his apartment window in New York and would die. He's a successful 52-year-old, and he decided to commit suicide. How does one do that? So here our acharyas say that as long as we have a hope of gaining ananda, we may not have gained ananda, but as long as we have a hope of gaining ananda, we want to be alive. You want to be alive. Bed, bath and beyond, I think, is the third word. BBB. So as long as anyone has a hope, this is what happens when you are given, kind of like a bad news that I'm very sorry to tell you, you have the 4th case of cancer. And I don't know what your prognosis will be. I don't know how long you'll be alive. So even in that analysis, one feels that maybe I can beat it, or maybe I can be alive for at least a year or something. So I can be asleep at night and be ananda and so on. So you don't think about committing suicide. But suppose you have a situation that develops where there is no expectation of gaining ananda, as it happened in this gentleman's case, because he did some crazy things in the stock market. Crazy things. And he was caught with it. And he would have had a miserable life of jailed, all his money would have been taken, dishonor. He had no expectation of ananda. So, but his quest for ananda is still there. You see, this is the thing. Even in a suicide, if a person committing suicide, the desire for ananda is still there. This is a thing to be known. You see, supposing you say, I am not going to have any joy in my life, and I'm okay with it. No. Because the person who is desiring is joy himself. And so you cannot not have an expectation for joy. But what you say is that under these circumstances, I don't see any hope of obtaining joy. Therefore, I want to end this life in the hope that I will find something in the next life. That's exactly what a suicider does. So even in a suicide, the desire for ananda is prevalent. It is very much not prevalent. What's the word I was looking at? Is obvious, or something like that. It is there. It cannot be transgressed. So anyway, so this is what happens in that case also. So now Bhrigu says, going back to the commentary, he says, sir, I think ananda is Brahman. And this time, as opposed to saying, no, go back again, think some more, go back again and think it is mana, think about this buddhi. His teacher says, yep. So the nature of Brahman is ananda. But even at this stage, there are some shades of ananda that have to be analyzed. So the falsity of ananda and the reality of ananda, the temporariness of Ananda, as we saw in the reflection and so on, also have to be done. But you're getting close. You're getting close, no doubt about it. So now, the verse number 13 and 14. Let's see, what time is it? 9:04. So I think we still have some time. So verses number 13 and 14 now zero in on Ananda. 13 and 14 simply reiterate. So in number 13 he says, Anandat eva bhutani jayante tena jivanam tesham layascha tatra adav ataha brahmanandaha na samshaya. He says, that's it. You've reached the pinnacle of what you need to really clarify, it getting close to it. The nature of Brahman is Ananda. But now number 14 says that the Ananda that you experience either in the waking state or in the dream state is broken up. Broken up in what is called Triputi. Triputi means the three different forms of it. So, Jnata, Jnaya and Jnanam. The knower, known and knowing. Enjoyer, so Triputi is all over and everything. Enjoyer, enjoyed and enjoyment. So as long as you have this Triputi, there is no real Ananda, there is only a semblance of Ananda. This is the touch of Ananda. And so it is very much like you are tasting Ananda, and you are different from the taste of Ananda because you are the taster of Ananda. Just like you are eating a cookie, even though the cookie is very nice and sweet, very sweet, chocolate cookie, it's very sweet, but you are considering yourself to be a taster of chocolate cookie, and you equate the chocolate cookie to Ananda, and the eating of the chocolate cookie is the experience of Ananda, and you as the person who is eating the chocolate cookie is the experiencer of the Ananda. So you have experiencer, experienced and experiencing. So in that situation, and this is exactly what we have in our life. We have a taster, tasted, taste. We have a toucher, touched, touching, etc. This is called Triputi. So he says, okay, I get it that you are now knocking on the door of reality. You're no longer talking about annam, food as the basis. You're no longer talking about pranaha. You're not talking about manaha. You're not about buddhi. You're talking about ananda. You've reached the final point, yes. But now we have to now analyze the nature of this final point. So there he says that as long as you are still making a division between the three Triputis, you will remain as an incomplete Ananda. And so a complete Ananda, which means one which is beyond all three. You rise above the Triputi, and you have the very basis in which the Triputi is situated, but you are not the Triputi. You are the experiencer, you are the experienced, and you are the experiencing. That Advaita can only be the Swarupa of Ananda. This is what you have to understand. So here in this analysis, what is being pointed out, this is an important thing to know really speaking, is that the understanding of the reality of Ananda cannot happen instantly. So this, we look at the example of Bhrigu and Varuna in the Taittiriya Upanishad. This is all pointed out by Swami Maheswaranji in his commentary. He says that the basic lesson of these over and over again, a student approaching the teacher and says, what about this? And he says, not really. Think more. And here are the reasons why not really is there. Think some more. And why don't you take it this way? He says, okay. Then you do some more vichara. And he says, how about this one? He says, not really. So these stages of vichara require a careful understanding of yourself. Because if you don't do that, here's what happens. So you should be real, you should be seeing that. I mean, this is our experience in life. It's not theoretical thing. This is exactly what we go through as students of Vedanta. What happens is twofold. Okay? So one of them is, it remains as a possibility, not a reality. As a paroksha jnanam as opposed to aparoksha jnanam, as we have talked about it before. Another way to look at that is that this is the wisdom of Vedanta, Shastra. This is not my wisdom. And in fact, this is exactly what happens when you don't do the vichara. You have not done the processing of it. So and I think Swami Paramarthananda had pointed this out very nicely. He says you may have eaten the food, but you haven't absorbed it yet. And the benefit of food only comes in when you have absorbed the food in your body. Just by eating, you may not really does it, because it has not been processed yet. So similarly here also, another thing that happens if you don't do the vichara. So the vichara, the analysis and so on, is the process of digestion. And unless you digest and process it, it won't give you the benefit. It will look like Gita says this, Taittiriya Upanishad says this, and so on. But a person who has done this doesn't say Gita says it, he says I say this. This is my experience. And this happens slowly. There are bits and pieces of it that you can get, but the totality of it yet you don't get that. So as I've said before also, it happens that it's like solving a complicated 3-dimension jigsaw puzzle where you solved some portions of the puzzle. And this is exactly what we have to do. We have to go through the various texts, and all the Shravanam and Mananam means that you just portion, but the whole picture has not yet come. And as you begin to assemble it, you see now an overall vision which is very clear. You see the picture behind it. Before that you were just looking at, here's a horse, here's a house, and so on, but now you see trees and the whole picture becomes very clear, and where each piece fits in also is very clear, which is brown, which is green, small, big. So this is the process we have to go through. So here all these pieces about Vishayananda and Vidyananda and Brahmananda and all these kind of things are bits and pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. And the teacher itself will now show you, don't you see that it is not possible for all these reflections until this is kind of like looking at yourself in mirror number 1, when it shows you the left hand side of your face, or mirror number 2 that shows the right hand side of your face. But it's you. It may show different portions of you, but it can only be possible if you are standing in front of all these mirrors. Don't you see that? This is exactly what will happen. If we are successful in analyzing this, we will see, my God, I am the real source of the joy. That is incredible. Right now I am very, very skeptical. How can you, this is like putting your arms around like this, and I don't know if I'm the real, how can that be? Please just follow me, think, and look at it the way the Shastra is looking at you. This is the process that you go through. And so, Swami Maheshananji, to complete that, basically says that the Taittiriya Upanishad, in recounting the story of Bhrigu approaching Varuna, is pointing out several things, two main things. One is that here is the process of finding the truth. The second thing it points out is it is not a joke. This is something very profound, and it requires a careful analysis over a period of time. You cannot fool your own mind. It is very skeptical. I don't get it. I said, no, this is okay. These classes are good. Just accept it. It is okay, but I don't get it. When you go out of the class, the mind says, see, I don't get it. So in order to convince the mind, so this is what is called buddhi over manaha. So you have to be wise enough to answer the doubts of your own mind. And eventually you cannot even do it by yourself. You have to take the help of Ishvara. So this is exactly what the Gayatri Mantra says. This is why it is the epitome of seeking help from Ishvara. It says, Om Bhur-bhuvasvaha tat-savitur varenyam bhargo devasya dhimahi dhiyo yo naf prachodayat. So this is all the rest of them is just the praise. Om Bhur-bhuvasvaha tat-savituhu varenyam savituhu. Sun God, this is the sun, Ishvara appearing to me in the form of the sun. Then the real prarthana, the prayer is towards the end. It says, Ravitu parenyam Om Bhur-bhuvasvaha tat-savitur varenyam bhargo devasya dhimahi. I am putting my thoughts in your appreciation, may you be in charge of my buddhi. May you help me develop the right buddhi. So the right buddhi means that may you give me the wisdom to answer my own mind. Because my mind keeps bothering me and he says, what about this, what about that, your experiences are different, your teacher says this. Can you please help me? I am unable to really answer it. Make my buddhi understand, lead me towards, so this is exactly asatoma satgamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya. May you lead me from darkness to light. May you lead me from death to deathlessness, from untruth to truth. Asatoma satgamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya. So this is the prarthana. And what it says is that my own mind asks about the doubt that I cannot answer. Can I please get the answer with your help? This is the prarthana that we have to do. And so here, what Taittiriya Upanishad points out is that that cannot be done until you really systematically think about it. It is the truth. But because you don't understand the truth, therefore you don't accept it. For you to accept it, you have to think about it. It is not something which happens automatically. You have to do that. So, all right, I think we will stop the class with this, and we will continue our tour of the very different kinds of ananda, which are not the real ones, but they point out to the real one. Next time. Om asatoma satgamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnameva vashishyate. Om shanti shanti shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. And what it says is that interesting, Keshav says, not hurt to watch TV while eating. Yeah, it'd be good to just concentrate on your food and just do namaskara. I understand that. But anyway, I do it anyway. I do want to watch a little bit of TV, and I just don't get enough time, so I time share it. And good that you introduced yourself, Ketan. I know you introduced yourself as the son of people that have been listening to me. Do write to me as to give your background. Where do you want to get started? I can give you some hints on some more basic courses to take, but anyway, it's up to you. If you want to write to me, just give me an email and I will respond. I see what you're saying. If you watch games, if you're not pleasant, it may affect digestion. No, it's not. I don't find it as pleasant or unpleasant. I just want to see the news and see how the game progresses. I already know the score beforehand, so doesn't have any expectations on my mind. So anyway, that's what I do. All right, very good. If there's no other questions, it's good to see you all, and I will hope to see you next week. Om Hari Om.